Hello, and welcome to Making Creativity Pay, the podcast where we talk to people in creative industries about how they promote and market their work. I'm Dan Barnett, and on this episode I will be speaking to Kat Molesworth, who, as well as having a huge amount of experience in digital marketing, is event producer for the International Women's Podcast Festival, which is taking place in London in October, but is open right now to pitches to present from around the world, more details of which are in the show notes. We talk about traditional offline promotion for podcasts, what makes engaging social content to drive activity to your podcast, as well as discussing the festival and Kat's aims for it in more detail. In a normal episode, I'd edit out some of the more technical chat, but as this episode is a podcast about podcasting, I've left it in, starting with me moaning about the hassle of editing.
How's work going?
It's kind of going well. And I've actually got 3 podcast recordings. I had one Monday, you today, I've got another one tomorrow. So it's kind of good. So, this is the fun bit, having the chat. And then, the editing bit is always can someone else do that?
You should hire someone to do it.
Honestly, it's the problem with kind of people I've spoken to, who do it properly. I think, they get someone to do the editing, and it takes so much of the crap out of doing all this. And
honestly, my best tips on that are, as you record, note down the time of anything you're going to have to edit out, like coughs, pauses, redos, just like on the notepad in front of you, just write down the timestamp, then go in and click the marker on all of those, and then go back to them and do the fine edits. And it makes it so much quicker. Obviously, you've got all of the sort of normal noise things and all the different programs you need to run, but like in terms of the hard edit, like actually pulling down the episode and whatnot, it makes it so much quicker if you just sit and do the timestamps as you go. Although if you're with somebody who's really paranoid, you will make them paranoid even if you've told them why you're doing it.
Right, it's interesting actually. I mean, we'll probably talk a bit more about Diary CEO at a later point, but there was one thing in that chat with someone who kind of runs the social side and a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, where one of the tricks they said is that Stephen has like either a button under his desk or something attached to his leg, and if there's something particularly interesting, he'll kind of make that as a mark. So they've got that within the edit, so they will know that 17 minutes and 6 seconds that there's something interesting going on.
I wonder if they've got the road desk, because that would probably have it. It's smart.
Yeah, because in my mind, kind of when I'm going through a record, I think, that's an interesting bit. But I don't, I then hopefully have to remember where to find it. Especially if someone else is doing the editing, if they can see that you've knocked twice on the desk or whatever the signal is to say, this is a good bit, make sure this is in, then it's kind of a neat way of doing it and saves time. There's a load of other practical bits of advice from Kat throughout the episode, including examples of podcasts that do things particularly well in a certain aspect of podcasting. But for now, going back to a more traditional opener, where I asked Kat to give a bit more info about herself.
Hello, my name is Kat Molesworth, and I am the events and festival producer for Content is Queen, who are an audio and events company. So my background is very varied. Like, I've worked all kinds of different jobs and been in lots of different sectors, but one of the big themes running through what I've done is I love to create and share online. So I started an online fanzine back in the 90s, which was probably not read by anyone except me. I logged on every day at an internet cafe because I didn't even have internet in my house. And since then, I've had blogs, I've joined every single social media right at the beginning and created content. I'm a huge fan of creating online, of DIY production. I have my own podcast for several years connected to the conference that I was running called Blogtacular. And that's just, I think you could call me a creative magpie. I love making, I love sharing.
Yeah, because looking on your website, there's the podcast stuff, you're a consultant, you're a DJ, you're a photographer. I mean, do you find that that's kind of how things work these days, that you do have to have, a portfolio career, for want of a better phrase?
I think that's just part of the joy of opting out of employed work. Now, the irony is I'm not doing any of that anymore because, I am doing little bits, but I'm not working as a consultant any longer because I am now employed at Content is Queen full time. So that's my main role. So I've had to drop a few of the plates I'm spinning. But you will still find me doing the odd school disco because I'm not going to give up that as easily.
And so with Content is Queen, I know there's been, for one of the references, issues in the past about the kind of level of support within the industry for that. I mean, do you think that you can put that down as a blip and things are getting better, or is it still very much up and down?
I think the industry is running through its own troubles, like at the macro level, at the big companies. We've seen the headlines. We know that hard decisions are being made. So it's it's hard for me to speak on what happened. Obviously, what you're alluding to is the fact that we couldn't run the festival because we didn't have sponsorship, and all of that sponsorship was going to an event that didn't necessarily support the grassroots community and hadn't been running as long as the Content is Queen events. So that was unfortunate, especially for me, because I didn't get to work on a festival this year. And I love nothing more than organising and getting everything lined up and ready for people to have a great time. But, this year we have really big support from one of the big houses. I don't know if we've announced it yet. I don't think we have, so I won't say who. But we're really grateful for what they've put behind us and how serious they are about coming and making a difference. So, I've worked on events for the last decade now, and what you sometimes find with sponsors is that they want to put their name to something, but they don't actually know how to make an impact. And so you'll end up with an event sponsorship or a stand at an event and they don't know what they want to achieve. Now, people we're working with this year know that what they want to achieve is maximum impact and benefit to our attendees, and you couldn't ask for a better sponsorship premise, really. So I'm very excited about what we're doing in 2024.
Within Podcast Festival, there are more and more springing up. It's definitely, podcasting has its ups and downs, but overall the trend is very much going up. What do you kind of see the Content Queens Festival doing that's kind of different to those other ones?
Yes. So, well, I mean, the clue is in the name. It's the International Women's Podcast Festival. So it's very much focused on platforming the voices of women and the work of women and making sure that people who are often marginalised in the audio industry have centre stage and they can share their ways of making podcasts and their expertise to an audience of other women. Now, it's not that we ban men from attending. Men are absolutely welcome to come and attend. We have a code of conduct which everyone's asked to follow, and I think anyone who's coming to this environment is supportive of women and their work. But I think that's our big standout difference. The other thing that I think we really value is, rather than sometimes interesting but where does it actually get you industry discussions on stage, what we want every single workshop, discussion or keynote to do is helps people in the audience get from where they are currently to where they want to be. So everything has to be useful, everything has to be able to move people forward in their careers, in their podcasts, in their thinking, and have that impact. Because if you've spent time and money to come to an event, you want to be able to take everything that you've witnessed and experienced at the event and really put that into practice and make a difference in your personal creativity. And that's what we really care about. So hopefully I think that's what sets us apart. We have very different outlooks from all the events, and you met me at one of the other podcast festivals. I absolutely love speaking at and attending these kind of events because it's how we move forward together. And I think, as podcasters especially, it can be very isolating. Other forms of creative media online tend to have a bit more connection, but podcasting is so individualistic generally that it's good to get together. It's good to make connections and share ideas. And that's really where we come from.
Absolutely. I think the importance of communities is huge within podcasting, because so much of the time, you are broadcasting effectively, and without that kind of response back, you've got no idea, is it going well? Am I doing the right thing? But you can speak to other people in similar situations and they'll say, I have a problem with this, or I found transcripts really help, or I have a problem with this hosting company, blah, blah, blah. And, it gives you a lot more information and a lot more understanding of kind of, the kind of problems that other people are facing.
Exactly. It is nice to have colleagues, whether you're an indie podcaster who's doing absolutely everything yourself like you, or whether you're in a big production house as one of many producers on a team. It's really nice to have colleagues across the industry and to connect with people, because I think podcasting in the UK is really interesting and diverse. We've been forced to be at a higher standard because we have such great public radio, and we have those same creators like the BBC within the space. And so we've got to jump through bigger and higher hoops to raise that bar of quality. And it's such a thrilling place to be. And everybody moves around. So eventually musical chairs means that you'll end up working with somebody that you've met at one of these events.
Yeah, so I mean, talking about London Podcast Festival, I mean, your talk was on the kind of the social side and the promotional side of podcasting. I don't know if you want to give a quick recap of kind of what you talked about on that.
Is it terrible that I can't remember exactly what I said? I think one of my big messages is always, you should try TikTok. It might not be for you, it might not be for everyone, but if your audience is on there, TikTok is honestly so easy to get started with and to make gains with. So for example, last week I decided to edit together a video of my friend's shop in London, Present and Correct, best stationery shop on the planet. You should all go. And I'd taken a video when I went to visit in the summer, and I thought, oh, do you know what, I'll just put that on TikTok for a laugh because I was bored and lying in bed, and I don't know what my husband was doing, so obviously I couldn't switch the lights out. So I thought, oh, this, quick 5 minutes. So edited it together in CapCut, did a quick voiceover, and within a couple of days it had 20,000 views. I think it's at nearly 800 saves, which means people want to take future action. For somebody with very few followers, that's got a really nice amount of reach. It's changing people's behavior, which is what you want. They're saving it to do something later. And it was just a 45-second video. Is not a big video. Now, if I can do that lying around in bed, then anybody can take their podcast material and get traction on TikTok. Now, it might be that you just do straight cuts of what's in your show, or it might be that one of my favorite examples is always Diary of a CEO, because they do really sensational trailers, which I think more people could learn from. I don't know if you have to do exactly the same as them, but I think what they are so good at is building curiosity and building the desire to find out more about what's been discussed. So as we're recording, I think last week he did an interview with Busta Rhymes, and there were some really good cliffhangers in the trailer that made you wonder what was behind what Busta was saying. And then, there's a lot of emotional discussion about Chris Lighty, who I don't know if people know, but he was very brilliant hip hop. I think he was a label manager or a manager who sadly died by suicide, and how that affected Busta. And, you had all of these things being pulled into the trailer. It's a minute-long trailer, but so many unanswered questions. So you might want to take that route of doing slick edits, or you might want to take little chunks out of your podcast. There are people who I think do very, very simple videos, sitting with a phone just in front of them, face the camera, and they do brilliant, tempting trailers. This is how I found out about Normal Gossip, which is one of my favorite podcasts, because who doesn't want to be involved in gossip that doesn't actually involve you? Because I do not want to be part of the gossip, but I definitely do want to hear the gossip and pass judgment. So Normal Gossip is perfect for me. Inconsequential gossip about strangers, perfect. And I think the first video I saw of theirs on TikTok, it was just the host sitting and talking to camera about the concept of normal gossip and telling us some gossip. Sold. Instantly sold. So yeah, that's my biggest piece of advice for everyone, is just try TikTok, mess around, see what works, see what hits and what doesn't. I don't have many videos on TikTok because I don't create video full time anymore, but I've done lots of different videos, silly things that maybe got 1,000 views, and then things that I spent a bit more time on. They've done well. And this one that I did in my friend's shop has done the best, probably because it's such a great subject. So, I think when it comes to social, you've really got to think about what you like to see and what tempts you, and try and recreate that.
Diary of a CEO is a really interesting example. Listened to a podcast recently with some people who were kind of involved in the social, the promotional side, and they were saying that I think the guy who does the trailers, he's got a background in kind of Disney and all sorts of things. His job is making film trailers, and they've got 2 people, I think, full time just making trailers. Never mind everything else. So it's kind of, there's next to no way that, an average podcaster can do what they do. They're effectively, no different to a TV production company.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you can kind of say, well, I understand the principle. I can see what happens, and And like you said, it's well edited.
I do think that people can do that. So there's an example of like a podcast called Bittersweet by a woman called Natasha that came out last year, and she had very little following, but what she had created was the most beautiful audio, and it's such a beautiful series. They're very small podcasts, like short in length, but they really cut to the heart of the matter. But her audio adverts, because I don't think she even did video adverts, she did audio adverts. They are just so well cut. I think anyone can cut together something to that standard. Obviously, you're not going to spend the time doing it exactly how they do it, but I think any podcaster can use their ear and cut together a really tempting trailer from what they've got.
It's interesting you kind of mentioned an audio trailer there, whereas Diary CEO is very much, I think, video first. Without kind of wanting to get that philosophical question of what's a podcast, how much do you see video being more and more important, especially for discovery and promotion?
I mean, a video has been important for a long time. I remember there's like a group of people in the knitting community and crochet community who always videoed their podcasts and had them on YouTube. Like, we're talking 10 years ago. And to the point where when I used to make YouTube videos, I could tell if somebody was a knitter because they'd say they watched my podcasts, and they weren't, they were vlogs. So I think, video has always been important. It was less dynamic. It just used to be generally just a camera on the person speaking. I think now you're looking at using a 2 or 3 camera shoot. And again, you want to keep it simple. If you've got old phones, just set them up recording. Your iPhones are these days broadcast quality. So, you don't have to spend huge amounts of money and buy super fancy cameras to put your podcast online if you don't want to. So from my point of view, I'd say have one wide shot that you're imagining using for YouTube or sharing on Twitter or Facebook, and then 2 vertical close-ups on whoever's speaking. So like, I'm assuming that this is a 2-person podcast, like a guest and host, like this situation, and then just cut those. You can do it really easily. You can do it in phone. Video is incredibly important for promotion. TikTok is a really powerful platform, but all other platforms, video is enticing. And as soon as somebody opens up a video and listens to it, you've got their full attention, even if, like me, they're also watching TV. But regardless, if you open up a video on any platform, generally you're listening to what's been said. Add subtitles, then people can watch without having to put the sound on. And you've got, their attention that way, because when you're reading something, you've actually got to pay attention to it. Yeah, I think for promotion, it's more and more important every day. I think in terms of moving podcasts to video, I don't see that happening so quickly. You'll have some people who want to watch on video, but I still think the majority of podcast listeners are people who want audio only, and that's why creating a rich audio experience has to be your number one priority, and working on your video setup is an enhancement of that, and it's a promotional tool rather than being your main channel. That said, I think YouTube might be the second biggest podcast platform. So something to consider if you're not already doing it. But it's another time-consuming element.
And getting from that initial interest to getting someone to listen, more than just wherever you get your podcasts, what kind of things would you suggest for people to get beyond that? Oh, that thing's interesting. I then have to click this link, then click this other link, then click this next link to go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, whoever it is, and then download it. There's so many steps sometimes that just put people off.
For some podcasts, they are happy to take you wherever they can get you. So if you think about a podcast like Shits and Gigs, is it Shits and Giggles? The 2 guys who basically read out stuff from the internet and giggle, which is very funny. I consume all of their podcast content on TikTok. That's the only place I see them. I don't go and look for their podcast. They're really highly ranked, I think, on Spotify, and rightly so, because listening to people read out stuff off the internet and laughing is the best hobby on earth. So I think being less picky about where people consume your podcast can help you. So if you put decent chunks everywhere, then you give people greater access. Now, I might, if I needed to laugh a lot, go and download their whole podcast and listen to the whole thing one day. Like, they haven't converted me there yet, but I might. But I'm still giving them views, because if one of their videos comes up, I'm going to watch it to the end. They're going to earn money off that, unlike in podcasting. So So I think, being less picky about where people consume your podcast is definitely something to be open-minded about. To actually get people to click through, you've got to make it so desirable for them to either hear what comes next or for them to connect with you and find out more about what you're doing. So to come and want to experience it. And then I guess advertising on other podcasts, paying for ad spots on podcasts within your genre so that you get people who are already in their podcast app, wherever that may be, and primed to listen and maybe like, oh yeah, actually I'll queue that up for the next. That sounds good. Some of the biggest podcasts on earth, I'm thinking Serial, Alex Goldman's Startup. So what are they? They are 9 years old this year. Where did I first hear about them? They had a guest spot on This American Life, which I was an avid listener of at the time. And because they came from the This American Life production teams, they had that opportunity. Now, obviously, I'm suggesting people would buy advertising or exchange advertising with the other podcasts that you're both promoting each other. They took off massively. Now, Startup actually did an episode about why they didn't take off as much as Serial, but I think it's because they weren't quite as thrilling in those dark 2014 days when Serial came out. There was just so much anticipation. Now, it's not often you get a podcast like that changes the world again, but Serial really was groundbreaking at the time. And, the elements that made it exciting where you had to wait for episodes. The score was absolutely brilliant. Even the ad spot for MailChimp. Do you remember MailChimp? That was wonderful. It was so it was so warm and lovely, and it was repeated every week. It even made a spot on SNL right before the finale. I think they did a sketch on it, which I know the MailChimp team were really thrilled with at the time. Like, it made a big difference for them. I think as an advertiser, the way it took off probably made it very expensive for them. I don't know, but I imagine. But, they had all these elements, and then they had the big question in the center. Now, Sarah sets it out in those first few bars of, I've become obsessed with the movements of these teenagers for this hour-long period or something like that. And that in itself is a masterclass in leaving people with a question. So when you think about if you could do a guest spot or you could advertise on another podcast, what do you put in front of people to make it tantalizing? What makes them add it to the podcast app? And that's what you really have to think of at every moment. And again, coming back to Diary of a CEO, who we've discussed, they do that incredibly well. Their adverts make you want to know what's next. Now, you might not care about the person. Not every single episode is going to hit home. He does talk to a lot of cranks, but he also talks to a lot of very interesting people. And often they talk about things they've never talked about before. And that has impact. So, how can you turn your material into something that's tantalizing so that when people see it on the internet, on social media, or when they hear it on another podcast or they hear it being discussed, and always if they read about it in the papers, we'll come back to that, they want more. They want to know more. And that's what you've got to do, is help somebody build that initial desire, and then with your episodes you help them build the habit. So my husband loves to listen to cycling podcasts, and the great thing is there's always something for them to be discussing, but during big race seasons, they'll be doing daily podcasts, and he wants to keep up with those races. So he'll listen to the daily podcast, listen to the analysis on all the riding. I'm sure this is the same for all sports. I'm not a big sports podcast listener, but it builds that habit. And so he'll have his headphones on while he's doing stuff around the house, which is great because he's making that time for himself to listen. And from the podcaster's point of view, they are facilitating him being a loyal listener and building that habit. Now, I mentioned newspapers. I know, like, I'm doing a monologue now, but I mentioned newspapers. One of the biggest ways you can find a large audience quickly is to be featured in a newspaper or a magazine or a newsletter. People tend to overlook print media, but print media has massive audiences and massive influences. And I know lots of really great podcast reviewers are out there. You can follow them on Twitter. You can look for when they do call outs and you can press release to them. So you can send them a press release about your podcast. I always recommend putting as much audio as you can into a Dropbox folder so they can go and listen to it and review it. And the number one complaint that newspaper reviewers have about podcasters, including big studios like the BBC, is that they don't find out about the podcast until the day it's released, and therefore it is suddenly irrelevant for reviewing in a newspaper.
Yeah.
So if you want to be reviewed in the newspaper 2 to 4 weeks minimum before you release, you want to be contacting all the newspaper reviewers. It breaks my heart that podcasters just don't do themselves any favours in this respect. You've got to treat it like any other launch. People need to know about it before it happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing. There's this dichotomy within podcasting. It's both incredibly professional and it's part of the beauty of it, totally ramshackle. At the other, it can just be someone just speaking into their phone and dropping it out whenever they want. And so the beauty of it is that all types of things are available. But yes, it's kind of difficult sometimes, and it's hard work to be more professional.
We all have ambition for our audience, and if we self-sabotage by not giving ourselves the best chance of building that audience, then what's the point? You don't need to be your own enemy. You can just say to yourself, actually, if I want to launch this season, but I also want a chance of being reviewed in the papers, even if you're like, I haven't got it ready till the last minute, delay the launch by 2 weeks and just get it out to the reviewers. Because if you get a feature on your launch day, that's a great boost. And then you put out another episode really quickly because you've already got it. And you're going to build the momentum. You're going to build those downloads. You might get featured on New and Noteworthy because they can see high downloads on a new podcast.
Yeah.
All of these things, are really worthwhile. And my other big tip, if you want to be featured in New and Noteworthy, make sure you upload both formats of podcast art for every episode. And what I mean by that is you need the square format, but you also need the horizontal TV style format, because that's the image that they will use to feature you.
Okay. So you mentioned in kind of the more traditional types of media, but obviously we talked as well about social media, and where Twitter seems to have just totally tanked in the last 12 months for some reason. Don't know what's happened.
Nobody knows.
It's a mystery. But I mean, how have you found that kind of area of kind of online promotion? I know we mentioned TikTok is very much kind of, it seems to be where it is now. I mean, is there any hope for Twitter, or is it kind of flogging a dead horse now?
I think on this trajectory, no, Twitter is dead. I tweeted the other day, because I tweet all the time, I love Twitter, that I feel like one of those dogs who goes and sits by its old human's graveside every day. And that's what it feels like coming to Twitter, because I know that it's gone, but I still want it. And there's plenty of options. I haven't really put much time into any of the Twitter alternatives, but you've got Blue Sky, you've got Threads, which if they just fix it would be actually quite good. There's Sproutable, there's Mastodon, which I think everyone's given up on. It's just the big problem is you can't port your audience. I've been on Twitter 15 years. I've been on Twitter 15 years this year, nearly 16, and it's taken a long time to build up that audience. I spent years deleting the Britney bots to make sure that everyone who was following me was a genuine person, and I still do it. Now it's Russian bots. So, I've built up that nice quality following. I'm connected to people who I find fascinating, and they are not on Twitter any longer. And my follower count goes down as people delete their accounts. And I think if you're going to put your time and effort into something, Twitter is still worthwhile, but it would be my afterthought these days. I would be thinking about how I'm investing in Instagram, whether Snap is a good channel for me, how I can do TikTok, which is more time consuming. The great thing about Twitter is that you can have a tweet out in seconds, typos and all the time, but you can reach people. You might have MPs following you, you might have journalists following you, you might have people who are ready to share what you're doing, and that was the beauty of it. And then if you said something stupid, it's fine, nobody's going to see it. If it wasn't seen in the first few minutes, it's not going to be seen. You're all right. So yeah, it's dead. You need to invest time in the alternatives. I don't think a clear front runner has come out yet, and that's the sad thing. If there was one answer, it's like I'm on Blue Sky and I haven't opened it in ages, because I just like the daunting task of finding the 2,500 people I follow on all of the other apps and following them again. That's why Threads was kind of nice, because you at least brought the people that you followed on Instagram with you, even though they're not the same people I follow on Twitter. People who are great at Twitter don't take great photos generally. People who take great photos aren't great at Twitter generally. So it's a very different vibe. But I think Threads is probably the most active of all of them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I follow loads of people, well, loads of people full stop, but lots of people in the entertainment industry, so comedian stuff, because part of the thing I talk to is a lot of people around the Edinburgh Fringe. And the number of people on Threads, there's probably about maybe 25% of them who have Instagram also have Threads. But you go in and go to follow them, and you could see they last tweeted end of August. Once the Fringe was over, that was it. They'd kind of join, maybe send it through Threads, and then went, forget about it for the next 4 months. I'll see, last thread was 17 weeks ago, because, that's it. They've kind of done, they haven't had much response. And, as always with these things, it needs a critical mass. Otherwise, you're doing the same thing on a dozen different platforms for, diminishing returns.
Yeah. I think on Threads, the major problem is that it's unlike Twitter. You're not seeing what's just being said, and it's not chronological. So it will show me an amount of tweets from the last 5 days, which are not tweets, they're threads, an amount of things that people have said in the last 5 days on Threads. And I'll scroll and scroll and scroll, and I'll think, okay, fine. And then I'll refresh, and I'll get maybe 2 new things, and then the exact same things again. And that's just boring. It's not engaging, the whole. And I know that they've specifically said they don't want to replace Twitter, and they don't want it to be political, which, makes it boring, full stop anyway. But the magic of Twitter was the immediacy. Like, I remember, I think the first time I realised that, like, Twitter was changing how people behaved as a country and was, like, this big shared experience is probably the royal wedding in 2011, because like the rate at which new tweets were coming through, like everybody was experiencing and commenting on this one shared event in real time. And that was, we've had so many events like that over the years. I think I wasn't even going to watch the 2012 opening ceremony until one of my friends on Twitter was tweeting from inside the stadium being like, you've got to turn it on, this is going to be amazing. I'm just like, you have no idea how good this is going to be. And so I turned it on, and like, I can't imagine if I had missed that. Twitter was so good for things like that. And I think that's where Threads goes wrong, because you can't have that shared experience. So what's the point? Like, there's not an algorithm that can tell me the most exciting thing. Like, where are we going to go on Eurovision night? That's a big question for the audio industry. I think we'll go back to Twitter for that night, because there's nobody does it better. Absolutely. Unfortunately, they also do a lot of things worse.
Looking on your Instagram, you've got like 26,000 followers, but you've not really done much with it over the last few months. Was it, like you said, you're more a writer?
Years. Well, the thing is, I used to Instagram every single day, and I realised probably in 2017, I think 2017, 2018 was when I stopped Instagramming, and I only put up maybe one a month, if that. I think I've maybe only put up 2 this year. I had a real issue in that I was tying my self-esteem to my engagement on Instagram. And that's not healthy. And I think, especially when we're talking about having children, we need to really watch for how these platforms affect people in terms of their mental health. So I stopped working in that space, and I stopped sharing as much, because it's really, really debilitating to feel like you're not good enough just because somebody didn't like, or rather not enough people liked your photo. So yeah, I tend to be a little more reserved on Instagram these days. Like it used to be so good. I used to love it. I used to do nothing but put Instagrams up, and I loved planning it. I loved thinking about it. But there was a big change in algorithm, and it just meant I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't cope with how I was making myself feel because I was so invested in it. So I had to just really pull back. It's a shame because I do enjoy it. And I think every time I post, I get messages from people saying how much they miss me, which makes me feel so guilty. But I'm on Twitter every day. So if people could just be a bit more active over there while it's dying, that would be great. But yeah, maybe one day I'll go back. But I do occasionally do stories and I do put pictures up. But yeah, I did have a lot of followers. But I was on Instagram from the very beginning. I was one of the first users.
Right.
So
yeah, it's one of the things I'm interested in with, especially speaking to performers where, so much of what they do is tied up in that success. If I put a tweet out and two people like it, well, it's neither here nor there. But if your job is to be funny and you put something out that you think is funny and you just get tumbleweed, that might be nothing to do with how good it is. It just doesn't get picked up. The algorithm doesn't take to it or whatever. Yeah. But that can be, soul destroying.
Yeah, it is. And I do think as creatives, in some ways, like I love social media. I'm not going to knock it properly, but in some ways, social media has taken away some of what we need in order to build up our creativity, because we're constantly having to put out little pieces of ourselves. Now, if you're an illustrator or a comedian, you're constantly having to show some work, and that in and of itself is work, which just detracts from all of the other things that you're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think it can be a bit of a hindrance. It's wonderful to be connected to so many people around the world and to be able to share your work and reach people who've never heard of you, especially like for comedians. Like, some people have really taken off just by being able to put clips of their shows online. But it has a side that, takes a price. And that is hard, especially if nobody likes it. That's the worst. So
going back to content is key. So going to plan an in-person event. So again, kind of coming back to more the thread of the podcast about kind of making creativity space. So within that, you then have to find sponsors, find a venue, find speakers, promote it, market it. That's an awful lot of things.
It is a lot. It's exciting. We went and visited a venue last night, and it's somewhere I'm really excited about. What can I tell you that's a secret? I can tell you it's the beginning of October. So we haven't announced the date yet, but we will be soon. We'll be opening speaker applications soon. We will have an international online element again, so people who can't necessarily come and participate in the London element will be able to either speak or watch internationally. We're going to have more than one event. There's going to be, I can't say too much, but there is going to be a very interesting evening event ahead of the actual festival that I think people from across like all of the spectrum, listeners, producers, creators, hosts, everyone's going to be excited about. I'm very excited about it. So yeah, there's huge amounts to organise, and it's something I really relish. Like, going in and rearranging the website and creating all of my different forms and thinking about what didn't work last time and what we need to improve on, how to make the speaker journey easier, to make sure that speakers have everything they need, but also give us everything we need. And if anybody out there is planning to be a speaker at any event, please get yourself some professional headshots now. Even if you've had some for the last few years, if you keep using them, they're a bit tired. It's time to update them. If you want to be featured in magazines and newspapers, which you do, please get some professional photos of yourself as a podcaster. Couple of different setups, couple of different outfits. Make everybody's life easier, especially mine. If you want to come and speak at one of my events. But, I do think as podcasters, we need to think about ourselves as personalities who are ready to be featured in the media. And you need to make that easy for the media. You need a folder that has images that they can just go into and take from, high-res images that could be printed in the paper or, put online somewhere. But yeah, that kind of thing's all very interesting to me. I love helping people. Like, and as you mentioned earlier, I'm a photographer, so if I have a speaker who's absolutely desperate and can't get images sorted, I will go to them and take the images myself. So,
and in terms of the content there, is it going to be like the full soup to nuts? So, as well as content itself, about production, editing, maybe the more technical side of, kind of open podcasting 2.0, maybe some of that kind of stuff. Is it going to cover a variety of areas?
well, this is the fun thing. I don't know yet it will always cover a variety of areas, but I don't know what we're going to cover. I like to be open to what people pitch to us. So if somebody can convince me that we desperately need a session on soundscaping, which I think we do. I think soundscaping is really important, and a lot of podcasters don't know where to start with creating different atmospheres and with adding music to their podcasts. If somebody pitches that to me, that's going to be really exciting. So the way the system works is we hold open pitches, so those will open I think just after New Year, and people tell us what they are expert on, what they would like to put a panel together on, anyone else they think would work on that kind of panel, or what workshop they would like to run. And then from that, we start to narrow it down to what we think would work, what we think's exciting, what speaks to the industry, and then we interview people, and then build the schedule from that. Now, always I'll have some things in mind that I'll be thinking, oh yeah, that would be really useful if we could do that, and we'll go out and find people for that. But I think the nice thing is that the schedule is largely open to what people want to present.
Yeah.
So rather than putting people in a box of our conceiving, we're looking at what are people speaking about, what's important to them.
Okay, fantastic. Sounds great. And so, I mean, like you said, that's your new role now. So is that pretty much full time the next 10 months of your life is kind of putting all that together?
Pretty much, yeah, exactly. I do have a couple of other roles that I've kept on, but they are 1 or 2 days a month, rather than anything significant. So yeah, I'm fully in Content is Queen, which is it's just so exciting to be back with the team, because I did miss putting on an event this year, and I didn't know whether I would be the producer because I started as a maternity cover. So it's really nice to have that role permanently, and to be able to really work on the vision for what we're creating, because I haven't mentioned before, but the Content is Queen is run by Imriel Morgan, who is, to me, one of the most exciting people in podcasting. She has really big ideas about how to transform the industry. So they run a micro grant program which helps podcasters create new podcasts, and has placed people in the BBC and all sorts. It's led to great things for people. They're currently working on judging for that at the moment for this year's round, and next year's round will be open late 2024, I believe. So they do work as a production house. They have a studio in Somerset House, which is very central London, really nice place to be. And of course, she creates these big events that are designed to shift the needle and to help people move forwards. And the great thing about working with Imriel is that I always think that I can often be a bit of a crazy optimist, but she really matches that energy and takes it further. So we'll be having these meetings where we're like, oh, what if we could do this? And I can't tell you the kind of people we've tried to hook, but it's outrageous. It's outrageous, our audacity, when we're trying to bring people in. So, I always think that if you start off, trying to do the most audacious thing, you're going to do something fantastic, which I believe we have in the past. We've had some really great events, and I started off being an attendee and a speaker, and now I get to put them on and work alongside Imriel, which is the best treat. Honestly, getting paid for this, what a joy.
Fantastic. Yeah, because I've run events in the past for maybe 100 people, and I know that's an awful lot of work. So something on the scale you're doing is mind blowing. Like you said, you start with a blank sheet of paper. Start to look at venues. How do you even? I know you've done some in the past, but do you think, right, I want 200 seats, 500 seats, 5,000 seats? How do, like you said about being an optimistic, where do you put it?
I would love to be at 5,006. I don't think the industry's that big. So we're looking at hundreds rather than thousands. And generally, like, you want the venue to have, key for me is the venue needs to have a really nice space for people to be out of sessions in. So, somewhere for them to mingle, to meet people. I like to have seating. I hate events where you have to stand up the whole time. I mean, that's because my body doesn't like standing up. So the second I haven't got a seat is the second I stop having fun, really. So I like to think about people's comfort and how they can meet people and like the serendipity of that. And then from there, you want spaces that have really good audio, that everybody is able to feel comfortable in and see. I like to have spaces that are probably a bit bigger than the number of people who are going to be in the biggest size room, because then people can spread out a little bit, because being packed in isn't always comfortable for everyone. And then, like, chief amongst everything is that it's accessible, that, there are easy ways for people to get in, that we're not excluding people by our choice of venue. And I just think, that's where I like to start from with venues, is making sure that everybody is going to be taken care of well, that their needs are going to be met, that they can mingle, and then that we've got the spaces to put on the kind of talks and events that we want to, with great audio. Can't stress it enough.
Thanks to Kat for her answers and thoughts on all things podcasting. There's more details in the show notes about Kat, her work, some of the topics we discuss in the episode, as well as details on the International Women's Podcast Festival. If you enjoyed this, check out some of our previous episodes where we speak to people about making creativity pay. If you're particularly interested in podcasting, the back catalogue includes Pod News editor James Cridland and Captivate co-founder Mark Asquith. Thanks for listening.